Today, we are going to be talking about the big topic of budget and how to engage around that. My name is Kai Kafferson, and my role at Thoughtexchange is a client success manager. So I've had the opportunity to work with both our partners in the States and in Canada. And from this, I've really come to learn that budget is something that really transcends provincial and national boundaries. And that in budgeting, we talk about dollars and cents and numbers, but really at the heart of that, it's people and emotions and trust. So we have this beautiful opportunity today to learn about how Deneka Michaud beautifully navigates this in her budget engagement at North Vancouver School District, SD44. And we are going to be joined today by folks from across Canada, across the States, communicators in education, as well as different realms of communication. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. And I will just tell you a bit about the format of today's event. We're going to spend about 20-25 minutes digging into the work that Deneka has been doing around budget engagement and what's made that so successful. And then we're actually going to turn it over and we're going to run an exchange on the thoughts and questions that you want to ask Deneka following this presentation. Deneka is going to be able to speak to those, and we're going to have a thought exchange facilitated conversation to get the deepest insights that we can from our conversation together. So if you would like to join the conversation on social media, I welcome you to tag us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and you can hashtag TE Virtual Events or TEVE. So today I want to introduce you, if you don't already know her, to Deneka Michaud. Deneka is the communications manager at the North Vancouver School District, and she actually originates from a background in journalism. Very accomplished academically, she has earned an honors degree from Carleton University and spent almost a decade in television and print reporting. Deneka continued on to obtain postgraduate certificates and a master's degree in communication, leadership, and conflict management from Royal Roads University. Deneka is currently the director at the Canadian Association of Communicators in Education, and she won the 2019 Case Bravo Award for her work on budget engagement. When Deneka is not working, she plays soccer, she'll be attending the bar method classes, she hikes, and she spends time with her 2 young daughters and her husband. So Deneka, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm going to kick it over to you.
Thank you, Kai, very much for having me today. And I also want to thank the Canadian Association of Communicators in Education, as well as Thoughtexchange for hosting the webinar today. As Kai mentioned, I'm the communications manager for the North Vancouver School District. And last year, our school district decided to engage our community a little bit differently when it came to our budget planning process. So over the next 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to walk you through the research, analysis, communication, and evaluation components of our engagement plan. So let's jump right into starting with research. So we asked ourselves 3 research questions. First, how are we currently engaging our stakeholders? Second, what has the response been? And third, what elicits responses from our stakeholders? So what did we find through our research? Well, in the past, the North Vancouver School District would host 2 in-person sessions related to our budget planning process. One would be in April and the other was in February. So the first one in February, the second in April. At these 2 in-person events, we did receive good feedback from our official educational partner groups. So our CUPE union, our teachers union, our administrators association, our district parent advisory council, as well as our district student leadership council. They would come and provide good feedback to us. But in terms of the broader public and our broader stakeholder groups, feedback was quite limited and attendance at these events was quite limited. And by limited, I mean 1 or 2 people and maybe no one. So almost non-existent. The other way that we would get feedback was through email. And again, very, very limited in terms of the responses we would get. In 2018, we only received 2 email submissions, both from parents. And other than that, we didn't get any feedback. So then what we would do is we'd go through that engagement process that would end in April, and then based on feedback, we would present budget priorities at a public board meeting at the end of April. And it was at this point, after our official engagement had ended, that our stakeholders would come forward. It was at that point that they'd come forward, and it would typically be because they were upset with something. They were either shocked about a proposed budget decision, or they didn't agree with the proposed budget decision. So at that point, staff would then be directed to go back to the drawing board and to basically start at that point then from hearing the community feedback, taking that feedback and going back to the drawing board, rewriting up budget priorities and presenting those again. And because our stakeholders weren't providing feedback during our first initial engagement process, stakeholders now felt like they didn't want to be heard, or they weren't being heard, or they were an afterthought. And for us as a school district, this wasn't the fact. We wanted and needed stakeholder feedback, but we weren't getting it, and we were getting it too late. So now the process was tense. And so we had to add in additional meetings, public meetings, to be able to get through the process. So as many of you are likely aware, as a school district, we need to approve a balanced budget by June 30th every year. And we were having to add additional public meetings to gather feedback and go through this process, where one year I believe we ended up passing it on June 28th or June 29th. So right up to the very end, to the deadline. And so what did our research tell us then? Well, first of all, it told us that our feedback was coming too late. We needed to be engaging our stakeholders, our community, earlier. And second, if you're looking at the IAP2 spectrum of public participation, we needed to consult our stakeholders. We needed to hear from them. We needed to hear their feedback, and we needed to communicate back what we heard. We needed to communicate back with them what we heard through feedback and how that was relating to proposed budget priorities. Essentially, our stakeholders needed to be in the know. And even if a decision was going to be tough, even if we were in a position where we had to make budget cuts because of monetary constraints, at least our stakeholders would understand why, because they've been in a conversation with us. They've been in a discussion with us where we were able to have that back and forth and talk to them and explain why decisions had to be made and the fiscal constraints we were working under. And I like to give the example here of, say you were choosing between additional staffing for more education assistant support or additional funding for technology supports in the classroom for students. And you're getting community feedback in support of both. But if you look at your feedback and just say in this example that the majority of the feedback supports the additional EA staffing, and if that aligns with your strategic goals as a school district, then that's likely the decision you're going to make. And when you communicate that back to your stakeholders, those who preferred to have additional technology supports in the classroom likely won't be happy with your decision, but at least they're going to understand why. And finally, we determined that we needed to simplify and demystify the budget planning process, as it can be quite complicated. And we needed to make that more simple for people so that they could understand what it was that they were providing feedback to. So how did we do this? Well, first we created 5 key messages that basically spanned our communication initiatives. I'll read these to you now. The first was that input from staff, students, parents, and community members will enable the creation of a budget that reflects the wants and needs of the North Vancouver School District community. Our second key message was this: 99% of the budget is non-discretionary, meaning it is already allocated to specific needs such as staffing, capital costs, programs, services, and supplies. Typically, it's 0 to 1% of the budget that can be considered discretionary, meaning that it is available to be allocated for budget priorities that are defined based on community feedback. Our third key message: Budget priorities need to align with the North Vancouver School District's 6 strategic goals. Fourth, the school district is not funded from the Ministry of Education for discretionary spending. Therefore, the Board of Education needs to find money from the existing operating budget to fund budget priorities that are identified through the community feedback. And fifth, that staff, students, parents, and community members are able to provide their feedback in 4 ways: in person, through email, online through Thoughtexchange, and through traditional mail. So, what were the tactics that we used to be able to communicate what we needed to our stakeholder groups? Well, we created an infographic. We also created a video, and we used Thoughtexchange. So I'm just going to jump out of my PowerPoint here for a second so that I can bring you over to show you our infographic. Essentially what the infographic does is it breaks out those key messages that we created, and it demonstrates what our budget is comprised of: 82% operating, 7% capital, 11% special purpose. It explains our total budget costs, but that 99% of it is already allocated. And that 0 to 1% is really what we're talking about here in terms of getting community feedback. It also explains a bit how the feedback that comes in needs to align with our 6 strategic goals and lists those 6 strategic goals, and then explains the way that our community can provide feedback. We used this infographic in a variety of ways. We used it digitally, on our website, sent it out via email, used it on social channels, but we actually also printed it up in very large format, poster format, and we put it in our staff rooms and put it at the front entrance of our schools so that students and parents could see it when they came into school every day. And then we created a video. We created this video again to use on our social channels and to share out via email. But this video was also our introductory landing page for our Thoughtexchange. So I'm just going to play this short 2-minute video for you now so that you can see what we sent out to our community.
We're looking for feedback from the community on allocating a portion of the North Vancouver School District's annual budget. The total budget is roughly $190 million. It's comprised of 3 areas: special purpose funds, capital budget, and operating budget. Special purpose funds must be spent on intended target items such as the Strong Start program. The capital budget must be spent on capital expenses like building maintenance. The operating budget is the largest part, comprising roughly 82% of the total budget. Most of this is allocated to staffing, with the remaining portion allocated to specific areas such as essential services and necessary expenses like insurance and utilities. Of the operating budget, roughly 99% is non-discretionary, meaning it is already allocated. That leaves 0 to 1% as discretionary, meaning it is available to be allocated based on budget priorities. And we're asking for the community's feedback to determine budget priorities for the 0 to 1% discretionary portion of the school district budget. It's important that the budget priorities align with the school district's 6 strategic goals. Expand the availability of best instructional practices and enriched curriculum. Encourage the growth of collaborative, adaptive, and personalized learning environments. Nurture an inspiring and healthy work environment. Develop and promote innovative and sustainable programs. Provide leadership in environmental education and sustainability practices. Strengthen and expand reciprocal community relations. When providing feedback, please indicate the initiatives of importance to you and how each initiative relates to the strategic goals. It's important to emphasize that the school district is not specifically funded for discretionary spending, so the Board of Education needs to find funding within the existing operating budget for budget priorities identified through community feedback. There are 4 ways to provide feedback: in person, email, online, and traditional mail. Thank you for your feedback.
That was the video that we used and we shared out. And the Thoughtexchange question that we used to engage our community was this: what are the initiatives of importance to you? And how does each initiative relate to the school district's 6 strategic goals? So before I jump into a bit of those results that we got through our engagement, I just want to take you through quickly the timeline and budget for our overall engagement plan. Now I know that this is small to see, but I just wanted to show it to you all on one screen. Our engagement spanned from January through until May. And in January, it started off with creating that video and poster, the infographic, as well as we started with our email communication to our stakeholders about the different opportunities that they would have to engage in our budget feedback process. Then from there, we hosted our first in-person meeting at the beginning of February. Then our email comments opened up. And then from there, our Thoughtexchange opened, and that was open for roughly a month, just under a month. And right leading up to the Thoughtexchange and throughout this exchange is really where we did a lot of promotion. So we sent out emails, we had the hard copy promotions in the schools, we had information on our websites, and we did social media promotions as well as social media advertising to our targeted audiences. Following our Thoughtexchange, we did our second in-person feedback session. And following the second in-person feedback session is where we reported back to our community, where we let our community know what we had heard through our engagement process. And then after that is where we presented budget priorities to our board. We presented that along with the results of our feedback and how the results of the feedback correlated to the suggestions going before the board. And then finally, the annual budget bylaw, so the full budget, was actually presented to the board at the end of May. So overall budget.
I just want to jump in and dig in there because I love the way that you used both diverse communication and social media and online engagement tactics as well as the in-person event. And I just wonder if you can speak a little bit to the decision to couple those two together, maybe how it differed from previous engagement strategies, and then how those online pieces, so Thoughtexchange and social media, impacted the in-the-room event setting with your stakeholders.
Yes, so I mean, for us, it's important to allow people to engage with us and communicate with us in ways that work for them. And some people prefer to come and speak with you in person and have that opportunity, whereas other people need something quick and need to be able to do it digitally. What was really nice about having this integration was that our community groups were also able to use the tool and the Thoughtexchange tool to be able to use that as a basis for their feedback as well. So our district student leadership council, for example, was able to use our Thoughtexchange so that they as a group could formulate their official submission to us as an educational partner group. So it really helped leverage that. And with our North Vancouver School District Parent Advisory Council, it was really helpful for them as well because they were able to share that out with their members and be able to get feedback that way from parents so that what they put forward they knew was representative of their parent community.
Beautiful.
So I think just making it more accessible to people really opened it up for our stakeholders.
I love that.
So if we move over quickly just to our budget, overall the poster or the infographic was about $300, the video about $1,900, and it took about 11 staff hours. So our hard costs were about $2,200. And this isn't just a 1 year. We're using the infographic and video again this year, and we'll also use the infographic and video again next year. We are in the process of engaging our community with strategic planning to redefine our strategic goals. So 2 years from now, we'll have new strategic goals. But this video and infographic will carry us through 3 years. So expenses in that regard were quite minimal and have been quite worth it. And this is, so before I show you why it's quite worth it, I think maybe you might be interested in what our engagement results were. So I'll scoot back over here. And here are the themes that came out for us. So the themes that came out from our community were mental health and social emotional learning, technology, music, new curriculum implementation, inclusive education, school cleanliness, and sustainability. So those were the budget priorities that we were able to put into our budget priorities that went before the board. So in terms of evaluation, what did we measure and how do we do? So we measured the amount of feedback that we received, as well as the actual feedback that we received, the types of feedback that we received, and who was providing feedback. So the goals that we set, first of all, we knew that we wanted to increase the amount of people providing feedback. However, because our feedback in the past had been quite low at only 2 emails the previous year, and because for us, this was the first time we had used Thoughtexchange to go out to our community, we weren't entirely sure how the community would react and what the interest would be. So we left that goal pretty open, just saying we wanted it to increase. We wanted it to be more than 2. We wanted it to be more than 2 submissions. And how did we do? Well, I'll jump back over to our Thoughtexchange here, and I will show you. So overall, we had 262 people provide feedback. They provided 161 thoughts and did 5,468 ratings. So the participation level in our budget planning increased by 12,800% over the year before. So for us, that really blew it out of the water, and we were so happy to have such great participation levels and such great feedback come in from our stakeholders. It really made a huge difference for us. The second goal that we set was that we wanted the feedback to come from students, staff, parents, and general community. We wanted it to come from all of our primary stakeholders. So how did we do there? Well, we were also successful. 30% of the feedback came from staff, 57% of the feedback came from parents, 8% came from students, and 4% came from community. So we were very happy with this breakout of feedback. And this feedback being representative of all stakeholders combined with our official feedback submissions from our partner groups was really powerful for us and very meaningful and provided really rich content. So our next goal that we wanted to achieve as a school district was we wanted to make sure that the feedback we received was applicable. And that's really where that infographic and where the video came in, is we wanted to explain to people the types of feedback that was relevant within our budget planning process. And, you know, we wanted to make it clear, for example, that this is the constraints essentially, and this is where feedback can be provided, and that, you know, providing feedback, for example, on wages, it isn't relevant because that's set at a provincial level. So we were really trying to bring it down to what difference can we make at a school district level, and where is the feedback applicable. So did we achieve this? Yes, we did. Overall, there were a few feedback submissions that came in that were outside of the scope of the school district mandate and responsibility. Mainly a few came in about having before and after school care. But other than that, most of the feedback was directly related to our 6 strategic goals, which also made it really easy for us at a school district level to see how the feedback fit with us as an organization and how it could fit within our budget planning process. And finally, the last goal that we set was that we wanted to avoid our feedback coming in late. We wanted to avoid having last-minute concerns, or what seemed like last-minute concerns to us, be put forward to us after our engagement process was over. So did we achieve this? Yes, we did. So instead of receiving no engagement during our official engagement process and then receiving all of the engagement after the engagement process was over, this time all of our engagement and feedback came during the engagement process, So by the time that budget priorities went forward, our engagement was over, and we didn't have anybody coming forward at that point providing their feedback after the fact. So that really enabled the entire budget planning process to run more smoothly, to reflect the needs and wants of our stakeholder groups, and to be able to present something to our board that was representative of everybody's needs, as well as tied in with the strategic goals as a school district. So that's it for me in terms of my overall. So I will pass it back over to Kai. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much for walking us through that, Deneka. I feel like I love the way that you acknowledged kind of the aspect of tension that can occur in budgeting, and walking through how bringing people into that engagement process can be a way to mitigate that, but also having to really set out a framework of what's possible, what can we actually do, and then what do we need from you to be able to do that. And I think that this really highlights the way that you can really move forward confidently in the way that you understand who this information came from, and that when you've got the parameters of what does successful engagement look like, that you can understand that that is the direction that needs to be taken, and when with these results, take action on them. So I love this outline that you've given us, and I see that there are some questions popping up in the chat now. So I am actually going to put the slide up. So what I invite everyone to do is, I'm sure there's lots of burning questions and ideas for Deneka. So we're gonna have the chance to put those into a thought exchange. The way that this will happen is by scanning the QR code on the screen, or by navigating to tejoin.com and entering this 9-digit code. Amelia will also put the link to the thought exchange in the chat. You're welcome to click that and join. And I'm going to give a few minutes of silence for everyone to enter the thought exchange and submit a thought or question for Deneka, and then you can rate the thoughts of others. So we'll give a few minutes for folks to go ahead and to participate. All right, beautiful. So let's go ahead and jump in here. If you're still rating thoughts, that's okay, keep going, but we're gonna go ahead and start speaking to these. So Deneka, our top thought is, what was the feedback from the board? Can you take us through what that was like for you?
Yes, the feedback from our board was phenomenal. So some of the other questions that I saw coming up were a bit about where this came from and how approval was achieved, and whether or not this was district driven or board driven. And this was really collaborative between our elected board and our school district senior management team. What I did was actually present the research. So starting with the research and being able to demonstrate, have those research questions and demonstrate from that research where we were falling short, and then putting forward a comprehensive communication plan that laid out my suggestions for how we can use communication to rectify the issues that we identified through our analysis, was really the way that our board and executive management supported this initiative and gave full approval for it. So we went through that process where I did the research and I put together a comprehensive communication plan, which I then presented to our executive management and the board, and then they had feedback into the plan and we adapted it according to that feedback, and then we executed.
I love that. Very meta of gaining feedback and buy-in on a process that encourages feedback and buy-in. Vying for the top thought here, we have another one that has just squeaked in. Can you speak more about how you reported back to the community once you collected the engagement results? Any strategies in the loop?
So I think if for a second, if I can share my screen again, I will, oh, you're sharing yours, sorry. I just wanted to, if I could share my screen for a second, then I can actually show you the report that we shared out. So if I go over here, okay, so from Thoughtexchange, we actually created a report that we shared out with our community. So it has the question up at the top that we asked, which someone had asked this again in the exchange as well. Our question that we used was, what are the initiatives of importance to you? And how does each initiative relate to the school district's 6 strategic goals? So we presented to the community the engagement participation rates that we received, as well as our top thoughts. So we sent this out so that our community could actually see the top thoughts came out and the themes that came out. So we were able to share this back out to our community via email, mainly with our stakeholder groups and through our website and social media channels, what we heard. And then based on, and then how that tied in. So we were able to communicate back first, okay, here's what we heard. Here's the results of our engagement. And then based on these results, here are the budget priorities that are being suggested. So here are the budget decisions that are being suggested. And the way that document is laid out is it actually has the strategic goal and the budget priorities, suggested budget priorities for our board to consider, that link in with that strategic goal. So because this thought exchange was tied to our strategic goals, we were able to see how the feedback then directly fit into the budget priorities that went forward.
And Deneka, one thing that I love about sharing reports back is that I find it really easy. I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about how you found the process of creating that report and sending it out.
Yeah, it was super easy. So basically within the thought exchange, once our theming was done, there's the AI theming, which is great. And then we were able to take it and clean it up a little bit more and then send out the report. And it's super easy. We just email out the link. So we have a communications system for our school district, externally with all of our parents, as well as internally with our staff. We also have our staff intranet, which we use extensively. And so we were able to share back our results just by emailing the link to people. And then when we had our budget priorities go forward, we were able to share out on our website as well this report in conjunction with the budget priorities that were being put forward.
That's great. Thanks for digging into that. And I want to just take us into the communication preemptively rather than post of the infographic and video, which were beautiful. So we've got a question that came up around loving the infographic and video. Can you share what programs you used for the presentation?
Yes. So I contract out, well, I do video work as well, but I find I don't have enough time most of the time. So I usually contract it out. So the video was edited on Final Cut, and I now am a voiceover artist as well. So wanted to, save some money there, but not having to hire a voiceover artist. So I did the voiceover for it. But essentially what we did is I have a host of graphic designers that I like to work with. This one was done by a woman named Isabel. She's absolutely fabulous. So I worked with her in terms of providing her what I wanted on the infographic. So once we had the infographic done, I created a script for the budget video. So I sent that script along with the infographic to our videographer, or to our video editor. And she was able to take my script with my voiceovers that I sent her along with the infographic and pull it together into the video.
Beautiful. Wow. We're honored to have a voiceover artist with us today.
And I actually did some of the voiceovers while at a case conference in my hotel room.
Deneka, the next few questions I think hit on similar topics. So I'm going to kind of combine them. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how you actually got successful feedback through this process. So that could be student engagement, sending Thought Exchange out through your notification system, using social media. Walk us through that a little bit.
So I think for us, the main way was just being able to email out a link and promote it on social, because it made it so easy for people. So for parents and staff in particular, we find the main way that they receive information from us is through email. And when we've asked them about how they like to receive feedback, that's still the primary way for those two stakeholder groups. So for them to just receive an email that was just like, click here to take part, that brought them to the Thought Exchange, that had that video right on the landing page where they could watch the quick 2-minute video so that they understood what it was about and be able to jump right into Exchange, was super easy. as well as on our social channels. We find that Facebook is primarily engagement with parents, Twitter is primarily engagement with staff, and our Instagram is primarily our engagement with our students. So just being able to share out on those channels as well that they can get involved, and here's how they can get involved, and be able to share links to just, click on and get involved. It just made it so easy for people, and that they could just do it right from their phones as well.
Mm-hmm. And with student engagement specifically, any key tips or obstacles that you learned throughout the process?
They really love this tool.
Amazing.
So for me, that takeaway was just that they really like digital engagement. And I saw another question in here about how this tool can be used for strategic planning. We're using this tool extensively right now for strategic planning. It's an 18-month process that we're going through with a comprehensive engagement plan. And we've been hosting in-person sessions that have been using Thoughtexchange paired with just online feedback. And the session that we hosted with students was absolutely phenomenal. We had roughly 100 students come to our strategic planning, student strategic planning session, and the feedback that they gave was so rich. Within about a 15-minute thought exchange of having them go in live at the event, they provided, over 100 comments and several thousand ratings on other comments, and the feedback that they provided was really, really rich and meaningful. So I think also what it showed to me was that students do want to be involved, and they want to be involved with things like budgeting. And that might not be traditionally something that an organization would think is going to interest that stakeholder group, but it does interest them, and their feedback is really, really important.
I love this piece that you seem to be highlighting of almost meeting people where they're at, and, assuming, yes, anyone can be involved in this process. And the thing that I think you do so beautifully is you do leverage the power of thought exchange, and then you are still really respectful of this in-person time and the value of that face-to-face connection. And I think that whether it's strategic planning or budgeting, there is a big strength in actually being able to use this as a tool in your tool belt. And that could be outside, but also within the live event settings. So we've got a couple more minutes. And I just want to end maybe we've talked a bit about the board, but maybe with this question, which is, what is the biggest challenge throughout the campaign? And I would just add on to that, what is the biggest challenge? And maybe what advice would you give folks who are thinking about entering this process that you've just outlined for us?
I would say that make it clear from the very beginning what the expectations are. So making sure that you, as that one of the questions said, making sure that the communication loop is closed. You don't want to just go out there and say, hey, we're getting feedback, and gather a bunch of feedback, and then no one knows where it goes. You want to make sure that you're communicating, that you're not just communicating you're communicating with. And just because you've received the feedback doesn't mean that your stakeholders know you're doing something with it. So you need to communicate back to them how their feedback has been used. And then people can see that even if their feedback didn't make it into your final decisions, they can see why, because they can see where the other feedback landed and how their feedback didn't quite fit in with the results and with the strategic direction.
I love the transparency within that, and the way that impacts the relationship between stakeholders and leaders in this decision-making process. And I think, it was beautifully navigated by you and your team at ST44. So I just want to say thank you, Deneka, so much for sharing this with us today. I know that we're probably going to have a lot more questions that come up, so we'll share some of this information back out with folks. Thank you, everyone who joined in today. It's such a pleasure to be able to have you participate in this conversation. And if you're interested to learn how Thought Exchange works, we're going to post a little link and information where you can actually explore the tool a little bit more yourself. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Deneka, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.